you are going to actually understand the science and the support strategy behind winter, like how to sync with it for happier, steadier moods, for better sleep, for happy hormones, and for actual healing and restoration. How are we eating and living out of sync of the season in a way that is making us sick and tired and stressed? And believe it or not, like popping a vitamin D supplement just ain't it. Hey mama, welcome back to the Thrive Mama podcast. I'm Martina, certified nutrition consultant and holistic health coach and a mama of two, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm here to help busy moms unlock their energy, balance their hormones, and break out of burnout using nutrition as a foundation. So on this podcast, we will dive into actionable strategies on nutrition, nervous system healing, and aligning with your cycles with a healthy dose of relatable motherhood thrown in, all designed to help you move past surviving to actually thrive in motherhood. Let's do this. All right, mama, it is officially November. We have moved through the hell that is daylight savings time, and our daylight hours are shrinking. I know that if you and I were in a room together right now and I asked the room, if I did a poll about how we feel about winter, we would see a consistent thread of resistance, of resentment, of depression, of fatigue, of just like craving the sunlight in the warmer months, which makes a lot of sense. And I am here today to bring you a different perspective. This is a conversation I don't feel like a lot of people are having, but could really transform the next 5 months of your life if you can really embrace and integrate the medicine that winter has to offer. I teach a lot about cycles, menstrual cycles, moon cycles, and the seasonal cycles are simply another mirror of how powerful it is to embrace and work with every phase of the cycle. And like it or not, winter for many of us is one of those phases. So if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you are right on the cusp of moving into these winter months. And if you are not in the Northern Hemisphere, you can save these strategies for the next time you cyclically move into darker, colder months. Because winter is incredibly misunderstood. Even things like seasonal affective disorder are really misunderstood. And the way that we approach feeling better in the winter months could actually be making all of it so much worse. And I used to hate winter, especially, once you get through the holidays, and then January and February, at least here in the Midwest, are just like one big icy wind blast to your face. And it's just miserable. But over the last few years, and especially last winter, I have been getting really dedicated to embracing the medicine that winter has to offer and shifting my lifestyle, my nutrition, my fuel, my sleep patterns, my daily routines to reflect the truth of the season in a way that actually leaves me way more energized, way more grounded, and moved me out of a space of needing winter to end before I felt joy and energy and vitality again. And that's what I want for all of you. It is possible. So there's really two threads of this conversation. The first is, what is the medicine of winter that is really important for our bodies that we are resisting, that we are ignoring, that we actually just need to surrender to? The second thread is, how are we eating and living out of sync of the season in a way that is making us sick and tired and stressed? So there is a level of surrender and acceptance, but there's also a level of support that we can add in so that we can move from this fatigue and depressed and freezing burned out state into a state of balance and flow and thriving through the season, not just trying to survive it, actually thriving through the season. And believe it or not, popping a vitamin D supplement just ain't it. That's not it. So here's what's true. Our biology runs on cycles, everyone's. And We can easily zoom in on each month as its own cycle, especially if you are menstruating. But we also move through seasonal cycles. And our biology is not built for eternal summer all year round. Just like nature, like cannot be in growth mode nonstop. It has to go through the shedding and the void of autumn and winter. Our bodies are designed to do the same. And I'm going to share a lot about biologically what's going on during the darker winter months. This might be kind of a more science heavy episode than usual, but I actually think understanding the biology is really empowering to connect to the medicine of what it's here to offer. And I first started connecting all these dots through Carrie Bennett's teachings on circadian biology. And I've since done quite a bit of my own research and connected with other experts. But if you do want to go deeper into the science, she is an incredible expert and resource on all things circadian biology. By the end of this conversation, you are going to actually understand the science and the support strategy behind winter, like how to sync with it for happier, steadier moods, for better sleep, for happy hormones, and for actual healing and restoration. Okay, let's get into it, babe. The seasonal shifts in our body. Humans evolved under what's called circannual rhythms. We've all heard of the circadian rhythm, right? That's our 24-hour clock. There's also an infradian rhythm, which is our 28-day menstrual cycle. And then there are circannual rhythms, which are year-long biological cycles. And these year-long cycles include your metabolism, your immune system, your mood and mental health, your digestion, even your hormones and your fertility. There are times of year where these things up and down regulate. And we see this all over the body. The mitochondria, which are those organelles inside of the cell, are energy producing all year long, but they naturally slow down in the winter. And we're going to talk about why that is. So there is absolutely such thing as depression, as seasonal depression, as seasonal affective disorder, and as like chronic fatigue. Like those things are all so real. But there is also an element of lower energy in the darker months that's actually biologically designed. And it's not a problem. It's actually just efficiency helping us conserve energy through these darker months. The thyroid comes into play here with lower energy, the cortisol patterns in our body, like we have less cortisol naturally in the winter, in the darker months. And cortisol is one of our major alert, get up and go kind of hormones. Our body is naturally telling us to slow down. It's also normal that our serotonin and our dopamine dip in the winter, especially in a body that is running on fumes or in survival mode. Those dips can translate into really persistent depression and fatigue and heaviness in the system. But biologically speaking, those dips are happening on purpose to shift us towards rest and repair. So winter is not inherently like crash season. It's actually your body's like built in retreat moment. If you think about the whole year as a mirror of each day of our lives, the 24-hour day, winter is the night. And night is not a problem. You're not supposed to have energy all night long, right? If you did, we'd be worried about you. You are supposed to drop in energy so that you will go to sleep, so that you will rest. When we sleep, our body heals. When we sleep, our cells repair. We're able to process and detox and rebalance. Sleep is incredibly healing. And winter is our body's nighttime, our sleep, just on a grander scale, on the larger rhythm. So just like night is not a problem, you're not calling being sleepy at night an energy problem, neither is winter. Neither is winter. That being said, we don't have to exist in like total crashed fatigue mode all winter long. There actually are things we can do to support energy even in the darker months, but we need to shift away from this expectation that we can be in internal summer all of the time. We have to sleep. We have to rest. We have to heal. And winter is biologically designed to help us do that. One of the ways this happens is through melatonin. So you probably are aware of melatonin as like the sleep hormone, and it does help us sleep. But it goes actually way beyond that. Melatonin is like a master healer of the body. It heals cells. It actually has been shown to eradicate cancer cells from the body. It clears out damaged and oxidized cells. So, like oxidative stress that adds to inflammation and heart disease and so many things clears out the cellular damage. Melatonin heals the gut lining. It like gets rid of dying cells so that we can start over fresh and steady and healed. So melatonin is incredibly important, and we have way more melatonin in the darker winter months than we do the rest of the year. Melatonin rises earlier in the day and it stays higher for longer each day in the winter. So this is a seasonal pattern that actually supports repair, healing, detox. It's incredibly important. And one of the main ways that melatonin knows to kick up is through darkness. A dark environment signals to the body that it's time to go into that heal and repair state. And it starts to boost melatonin production at that time, which means one of the biggest problems in how we feel during the winter is not actually the cold, it is our artificial light environment. Because indoor artificial lights are decreasing, like they suppress melatonin production by up to 80% in some people. 80% less melatonin when we're surrounded by artificial lights. This is really confusing our internal clock, but it's also getting in the way of the healing and repair that needs to happen. So, we're going to talk at the end of this episode about really specific, simple strategies you can start doing to shift your baseline to really thrive in the winter months. And you'll hear that light environment is a key part because we need higher melatonin. We're designed to have higher melatonin. All those longer, darker hours, when the sun's setting at like 4:30 in the freaking afternoon, that is extra. Think about it. That's an extra 4 or 5 hours of melatonin each day compared to the summer. And while the capitalist, internalized, productive part of us really resists that slowdown, it is biologically necessary to thrive. Now we have to talk about melatonin's like big brother, which is vitamin D. And we hear about vitamin D nonstop when we're talking about seasonal affective disorder, seasonal depression. It's like the go-to thing. And it's true that we have significantly less vitamin D being produced in the body during the winter months. This is true. We also know through many, many studies that vitamin D has a direct impact on mental wellness, serotonin, dopamine, on risks of depression. So this connection makes a lot of sense, right? I totally understand why everyone's reaching for vitamin D to try to like white knuckle their way through the winter months. But there's some nuance here that I'm going to do my best to break down for you because vitamin D and melatonin do a sort of dance together. They do this dance actually every single day. You've probably heard either from me or hundreds of other people on the internet that morning sunlight is really helpful for energy and for sleep quality. Part of the reason that's true is that vitamin D and melatonin always act in an inverse. And when we get vitamin D production in the morning from sunlight, it starts this like time release clock so that 12 hours later in the body knows to start up regulating melatonin. So there's always this like inverse relationship. When vitamin D is higher, that tells the body we're exposed to a lot of sunlight, right? This is daytime. This is higher cortisol. This is focus, activity, create more energy in the cells, create more ATP to be out in the world, and less melatonin, right? We have to be active. We don't want to be in rest and heal mode. And as vitamin D goes down, melatonin production naturally goes up. Vitamin D production is going to go down when it's darker. And in our dark environment, melatonin gets to rise and slow down the system. In the summer, we shift towards much more vitamin D because of the direct angle of the sun. Every minute of sunlight gets you more vitamin D compared to other parts of the year. and because of just the amount of time that most of us are in the sun during the summer. So this is a time of cellular activity, of growth, of external output, partially because of all this light signaling. Okay, this makes sense. In the winter, less sunlight means less vitamin D. This triggers a whole downshift in the body. Our metabolism slows down. Our cells, the mitochondria that make energy, that make ATP, slow down. They use vitamin D for that. So we are producing less cellular energy. So it makes sense that many of us feel more tired, that many of us feel kind of down and lethargic through these darker months. We have less vitamin D from the sun. The angle is much lower in the sky. We're not getting those direct UVB lights that produce vitamin D in the body. And we're just outside much less, right? So this all makes sense. And it's easy to jump to the conclusion that we just need to supplement with vitamin D. And then we'll have more cellular activity, we'll have more ATP, we'll have less of the lethargic, down-regulated symptoms in our moods. But I really want to offer the perspective that this downshift is not a problem to be solved in every person. Seasonal depression is real, but for many of us, the friction comes when we resist the medicine that this downshift brings us. Because here's the problem it's really easy to fall into. Let's say we start boosting vitamin D supplements in the winter so that our levels never dip. This really confuses our circadian cycle. This really confuses our cellular uptake, who is used to ebbs and flows in sunlight exposure through the seasons. It keeps our cells in this summer mode. And if vitamin D is high, guess what is low? Melatonin. So we get stuck in this vitamin D dominant cycle through the winter months when we were meant to be in a healing and restorative and restful season. That can't happen when our cells are still being flooded with vitamin D and igniting activity. This lower energy output from the cells is intentional. We're meant to conserve energy and heal. We're meant to have more hours of melatonin so that we can do this deep catch up in our healing journey throughout the year. It would be sort of like we start seeing nighttime as a problem. So at 8 p.m. every night, we flood the body with caffeine and stimulants to keep us awake because we resist the slowdown. The body's going to break down that way. None of us would say that that's good for us because we're meant to slow down and heal. The same thing is true on the macro scale. We're not meant to be in summer all of the time. So again, we're going to talk at the end of the episode about what to do when we are in true fatigue, when we are in true depression, when we really need energy and mood supports through the winter, because that's real. But what I'm really spending some time exploring with you right now is what is the biology behind this season so that we can understand the places that there's a true problem versus the places that there's simply resistance to rest. Yeah, can we feel the difference there? Where is there a true problem? Where is there simply a resistance to rest? Those are two different things. So you can probably tell I'm not a huge fan of default vitamin D supplements for everyone, especially through the winter months. However, there are some exceptions to that. If you have gotten recent labs, like in the last 3 to 6 months, and you are truly deficient in vitamin D, and I consider deficient anything less than 40 nanomoles per liter. So I'm a huge fan of using labs to get clarity on what our vitamin D needs are because vitamin D is so important. I don't want you to mishear this conversation. And actually, almost all of us are deficient in it. So there is a time and a place for intentional supplementation. But here's the nuance we can start bringing in here. And this is why we don't want to just take one size fits all health advice from the internet. Even this episode is gonna show up differently for each of you depending on what's real in your body. So if you know you're deficient less than 40 nanomoles per liter in your blood work in the last few months, you can continue supplementing through the winter, but you may want to consider lowering your dose. In the summer, I might have someone on 7, 8, 9,000 IU a day of vitamin D. In the winter, we want to drop that down. Maybe we're doing 1 or 2 or 3,000 IU instead, depending on where your lab work is. This mimics the natural shifting in the seasons that our body has evolved to thrive on and expect. The other exception is if you are pregnant, about to be pregnant, or if you're breastfeeding. Vitamin D needs are quite high, and as I said, most of us are deficient in some way or another. So this is not a season of life where we want to risk being deficient. So I, again, am a huge fan of testing your vitamin D levels during pregnancy and postpartum so that you can really personalize your supplements. But if you're not sure what your blood levels are, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, you probably still want to intake some extra vitamin D through supplements, and you probably want to lower the dose in the winter months than you would the rest of the year. Okay, before we move into nutrition and strategies for supporting our energy and thriving through the winter months, I want to talk about one more element of medicine that winter offers. So we've really explored melatonin. We've explored the healing, restorative potential of these darker months. But there's a whole nother layer going on here in the winter, apart from just the light, and that is the cold. So again, most of us are avoiding cold as much as possible. We're cranking up the heat in our house and in our cars. We're staying inside almost all of the time, if not all of the time. And when we do go outside, we are like completely sealed up to conserve our body temperature. Cold is physically uncomfortable. There's no getting around that. And it makes sense in our modern lives that we're like resistant to being in cold environments. But what the science shows is that short, like controlled cold exposure. So I think of this as therapeutic cold. We're not talking about like being outside in sub-zero temperatures for hours at a time. We're talking about short, safe, therapeutic cold exposure actually is incredibly beneficial for healing the immune system and even the metabolism in the body. There's this type of tissue in the body called brown adipose tissue. It's often referred to as BAT, B-A-T. So this is a type of fat cell that burns energy to create heat. That's like how it works. That's why it really exists. So we store energy in the form of brown adipose tissue, and then when we need heat, we can burn that specific type of tissue. And what's interesting about BAT is that burning it for heat actually improves metabolism. It improves resiliency in the body. It even improves hormone balance and is anti-inflammatory. So it's like overall healing and clearing out the system as it generates heat for the body. Now, the other main way that the body creates heat is through shivering. And if you're somebody who tends to shiver when you are outside in the cold, that is likely a sign that you are not very cold tolerant yet. You can actually train your body to be more cold tolerant by training the body to burn its brown adipose tissue instead of shivering. Because shivering works, right? Like it does generate heat, but it is exhausting and deeply uncomfortable. But with repeated intentional exposure, your body starts to adapt and it will build heat through BAT instead. This is why there's so much data about cold showers and cold plunges, because it activates this BAT and therapeutic cold exposure in a way that is really, really supportive for the body. And here's the cool thing. It does not have to be as intense as a cold plunge. You actually can activate this BAT, this brown adipose tissue burning, through just the temperature, the air temperature outside. So when it is cold, intentionally going outside, being safe, of course, like wear a freaking coat, like make sure your body is safe and embrace short-term cold exposure as a way to actually improve your metabolism, improve your immune function, and improve your resiliency in your body, your ability to cope with stress and come back into baseline. And if you think about BAT for just a moment, this type of fat cell that burns energy for heat, it is not going to be activated unless we need to generate heat. And for most of us in our modern lives, I want you to really think about over the last year of your life, how often have you actually had to generate your own heat? Not that often. Like for most of us, we are kept in really uniform, comfortable conditions all of the time. So that the body is just holding on to this brown adipose tissue for the time that we might need it later on. It's actually extra fat cells that is ready to burn for heat for you. And we just need the therapeutic cold exposure to do so. Also, interestingly, women, biologically speaking, have more brown adipose tissue than men do, which means that gentle cold exposure is particularly beneficial for women. Now, some of you incredibly committed souls out there are going to jump straight into how cold can I get? Can I jump into the cold plunge? Can I stay in the freezing shower? Can I make an ice bath? There are times and places for that, but I'm actually not a huge fan of that intensity for a lot of women that I work with because a lot of women I work with are undernourished, are working through burnout or nervous system healing or hormone imbalances in some way. And cold exposure, while helpful at some times of our cycle, could actually make things worse in other times. So we want to be gentle here. That's why I use the word therapeutic. Cold plunges for some people's body are incredibly healing. For other people's bodies, you actually just need to go on a freaking walk in 30-degree temperature with a coat and let that do it. So match your current level of tolerance. If you are currently pretty cold intolerant, a daily walk with a coat and gloves is actually going to do this for you. For others who are more used to being outside in the cold, you may need to have a few intentional minutes in the sunlight, in cold air, maybe without a coat, doing some deep breathing, just really letting your body adjust to the temperature and burn its own energy for heat. So this is a really key point that I think a lot of us just skip over when we're talking about how to cope with seasonal affective disorder or thriving through the winter months because most of us are still inside all of the time. And when we burn this brown adipose tissue, not only are we healing the body, the metabolism, inflammation, we are actually increasing energy. So if you're feeling incredibly fatigued, you actually need more cold exposure during the winter months to ignite your natural winter energy, which is this BAT, this brown adipose tissue. This is why I personally am doing a challenge this year where I'm going to go on an outdoor walk every single day this winter, rain or shine, snow or ice, blizzard. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to be outside on a walk, non-negotiable. And I did a lot of winter walks last year. I had a really devoted practice to still getting outside last winter, which was part of the reason last winter felt so much more balanced than previous years. But this year, I'm really doubling down on this therapeutic cold exposure. If you want to join me, let me know in the comments. We can be winter walk buddies and every single day find a way to get outside for a walk, activate your BAT burning so that you can generate heat, energy, heal your metabolism, and really tap into the medicine that cold weather has to offer. Okay, so we've explored the medicine of winter. Melatonin and brown adipose tissue play a huge role in healing, metabolic health, healthy weight management, energy production, all the things. And let's start shifting now into how do we support this medicine and how do we rebalance when there actually is a problem, right? When we want to lean into the medicine of winter, but we also are too fatigued, we're too depressed, we're too much in the downshift and we need to support the body. So first of all, our nutrition gets to seasonally shift. There is actually a natural change in our insulin sensitivity in the winter months. And insulin is what manages our blood sugar, right? So in the colder months, we are less sensitive to insulin. It takes more insulin to do its job because we are intentionally conserving energy. And that's not a problem. That is on purpose, but it does mean that carbohydrates are going to impact us more than they do at other times of year. And if you think about our ancestors, living out in nature, access to like carbohydrate dense foods was pretty sparse in the winter. You know, in the spring, summer, harvest time, we had access to fruits, to fresh vegetables. In the winter, it was really like meat, nuts, fats, like these things that were like shelf stable or were still available through the cold months. So there was a lot less, biologically speaking, of carbohydrate rich foods. That doesn't mean we can't eat carbs all winter, but it does mean we get to be aware that carbohydrates are impacting our blood sugar more in the darker months than they are the rest of the year. So in the winter, this really looks like focusing on a lot more warming foods, which most of us do naturally because our bodies are so wise and we listen to them and we crave more soups and stews and like swap out the salads for cooked veggies and swap out the fruit for sweet potatoes, right? Like we're thinking of these like warming, nourishing kind of foods. We're also moving away from cold foods. Now, my iced coffee lovers, you're not going to like this, but the more iced drinks that we're drinking through the winter, the more we are confusing our circadian biology, the more we are interfering with these natural processes of healing, restoration, heat generation. So we want to avoid iced water, iced drinks, even icy smoothies. You all probably know I'm like a huge fan of smoothies. I drink smoothies all year. Let me talk to you for a moment about how to do that. I change my smoothie up in the winter. So in the warmer months, my smoothies are primarily like frozen fruit, water, maybe some frozen cauliflower, frozen spinach, like electrolyte powder, and it ends up being like icy and thick and like, right, like really cooling and refreshing. In the winter, we shift our smoothies to be more warming, more high in healthy fats, and less high in like banana and pineapple and these tropical fruits that we just would not have had access to biologically. So for warmer swaps, I typically like to swap water for canned coconut milk, like full fat coconut milk. If it's a really thick can, sometimes I'll dilute it with a little water, but coconut milk is the base, not the cartons, the cans, using whatever fresh fruit I have available. So I will typically still put bananas in my smoothies because I love the sweetness and the taste, but I'll use them fresh instead of freezing them. And then I'll use like avocado or like almond butter, peanut butter, like seeds, right? Like less of the fruit and more of the nourishing fats, more of the warming bases, even just swapping water for coconut milk or frozen fruit for fresh fruit or adding nut butter could make a big difference, metabolically speaking. So, in general, we're really focusing in the winter months on protein and healthy fats for stable energy, for balanced hormones, for balanced blood sugar, and we're skewing away from raw cold foods and we're skewing away from really dense carbohydrate rich foods on a regular basis. Okay, let's talk about dehydration for just a moment. Winter dehydration is like so sneaky, but here's what happens. We have lower thirst because it's not as hot, so we don't notice it as much. And we are in dry, heated indoor air, all of which like sucks the hydration right out of us. So we're losing a lot of water molecules, moisture through our breath in the winter months because of the dry, heated air indoors. And then we're drinking less because it's not as hot and we're not noticing our thirst. Dehydration, of course, can contribute to all of the winter complaints, to low energy, struggle sleeping, depression, anxiety, like all of these things could be contributed to by dehydration. It could be a link. So drinking enough water, even when it's cold, simple but powerful, and adding in minerals. Minerals are so grounding. I mean, they literally come from earth, from dirt, and they are really important for cellular healing and repair and energy. So adding in the sea salt, the electrolytes into your water, trace mineral drops, like getting in minerals in with your water, really, really important. So those are two nutrition focused supports that we can really make. Make this shift into the high protein, high fat, lower carb foods and really boost hydration and minerals through the winter months. Let's get into some light supports because listen, We talked about how high artificial light intake is stopping melatonin by 80%, right? So our bright lights inside, both throughout the day and especially after sunset, are blocking the healing and rest that winter really has to offer. And we also live in like the modern world where we have to live our lives and do things and like go to events and like there's things, right, that include lights at all hours of the day and night. So, what do we do? So, we can filter the light that exists through blue light blocking glasses, through settings on our devices to really get serious about limiting how much blue light is coming through. My phone and computers always have like nonstop 24/7, a red filter on them that filters out a lot of the blue light. So it visually looks like a red tint to me and filters out blue light. That's super helpful. You can also have glasses on that block blue light from coming in. Now, if your glasses are clear, they are probably not doing a whole lot. You're going to want orange or yellow lensed glasses to really effectively filter blue light out. So, getting yourself a pair of orange or yellow lensed glasses, putting settings on your devices to limit blue light coming in, especially in the evening. Like we are putting these orange lens glasses on when the sun goes down. We're trying to protect melatonin so that it can rise the way it needs to. And the longer we're exposed to artificial blue light, the less melatonin we make. So even in December, when the sun is setting at 4:45 p.m., we are putting on our blue light glasses at 4:45 p.m. and wearing them all through the evening. We can also use alternative light sources. Candles and firelight are cozy as fuck and also really, really healing. Fire is high in infrared light, so gathering around like a campfire, like our ancestors would have done in the winter months to stay warm, is also healing for our cells. It helps melatonin production. Infrared goes in and supports cellular repair. So if you have access to a fireplace, if you can stock up on some candles and like do your bedtime routine by candlelight, wash your face by candlelight, read by candlelight. Like this is actually really healing for the body. Gather around the fireplace instead of the TV in the winter months and see how your sleep quality, your energy actually does shift. And speaking of the eating, digestively speaking, another strategy we're going to put into place here in the winter is to still try to align our evening meal with sunset. So rather than keep eating dinner at 6:30, 7:30, even later for some of you, we're going to shift it up so that as our melatonin rises, as the sun goes down and it's dark, we are finished eating for the day and we are letting our body enter, rest, and restore space. If we are actively digesting food, if we have a full stomach, trying to move into sleep or even just melatonin rich time, it's really going to mess with the patterns of the body. It's going to divert energy back to our digestion. It's going to slow the melatonin rise. So moving dinner earlier to like 4:30, 5 p.m. through the winter months, and then seeing if your body feels okay not eating again until the morning. This is a little bit of like an extended fast. So you could look at this as seasonal intermittent fasting. If you've been around me for a minute, you probably know I'm like pretty anti-intermittent fasting for most women, the way that most women do it, which is skipping breakfast, which is fasting in the morning until lunch. Not a fan. I've talked about that in other episodes. What can be biologically helpful for a lot of women is doing an extended fast overnight. So maybe doing 14 hours, 16 hours overnight, but doing it on the tail end of the day. So stopping eating at 6 p.m. and not eating again until 8 a.m. Or stopping eating at 5 p.m. and not eating again until 7 a.m., right? That is a 14-hour fast. That is intermittent fasting. It's just shifted to actually match our biology and our hormones in a way that feels easier for most women and also is really more appropriate for how our metabolisms work. This also helps with the seasonal insulin resistance that we talked about earlier. Since we are so much more sensitive to carbohydrates, we really want to preserve our rest and repair time And we want to improve our metabolism by shifting dinner time earlier and allowing that longer phase of fasting and allowing higher melatonin to rule our rest and recharge time instead of the digestion. And then let's talk about sleep for a hot minute. I would bet that most of us listening keep the same sleep and wake pattern throughout the entire year. And it's actually biologically appropriate to sleep more in the winter. It's not a sign of depression if you're tired at 8 p.m. It's not a problem if you want to sleep 12 hours instead of 8, right? Like this is where we get to really feel into what is a problem to fix, what is a resistance to rest that we just need to look at. Because biologically speaking, our melatonin is higher earlier in the night. We have less cellular energy being produced. Those things aren't a problem. Those are biological truths that we get to embrace. And that means there is a chance for more repair and healing and renewal throughout all of the winter months. This isn't laziness. This isn't depression. This is actually like metabolic maintenance, you know? This is healing at work. And there's a lot of patriarchal and capitalist influences that are going to create stress around this, that are going to cause resistance and guilt and stories, but really embracing rest in this season. Like there's nothing wrong with you that you don't want to like go meet your friends at 8 p.m. at night, like in January, right? This is seasonal living. This is cyclical living, and it's okay to embrace that in a way that works for you and for your life, of course. But really allowing this season to be a break from the grind, to be a break from the pressure, to be an output nonstop, and to really exhale and be still and rest and let the body do its thing and trust that in like February and March, when spring begins to return and light begins to lengthen, we actually biologically will shift into more energy and into more action. Now, that being said, we should not be moving through the winter exhausted all the time and so fatigued that we can't like find joy and purpose in our days. Like that is a problem to be fixed. And that is where some of these energy supports come in. The cold exposure, the extra sleep, the shifting to more warming foods, extended fasting, less simple carbs, more water, infrared light. These are the supports that we build in so that we honor the rest while still thriving in our days, right? Like if our daylight hours are shorter, we should still be energized and joyful and connected during those times. We shouldn't be in survival mode or in shutdown state. Both get to be true, right? We get to thrive during our waking hours and have extended periods of rest that honor the biological season that we're in. The last strategy that I really wanted to touch on here with you is grounding or like nature exposure. This is something I've talked about a lot as incredibly important for the body is touching nature, being in nature, like feet on the grass, hands on the trees, right? Like being in the dirt. There's so much incredible science on how this changes our like frequency state, our magnetic field, our inflammation levels. Like the science is there and it's really clear. The ancestral wisdom is there and it's very clear. Being in nature is healing. And this, I believe, is one of the key like root causes of seasonal depression is less about I have less vitamin D, so I need a supplement. And it's more about a deep disconnect between us and nature. We are now living in our little like wooden boxes that are heated and filtered and like totally separated from our roots outside. So these daily therapeutic cold exposure walks are going to help with this for sure, being in sunlight, fresh air. But there is still often a layer of separation, right? Like we're wearing boots, we're wearing coats, like we're not grounding into the earth. So, how the heck do you ground in the winter? Here's how. I've heard of people being really intense and like boiling water, pouring it onto the snow, and like putting their bare feet on the freezing earth. Go for it. Like more power to you. Personally, here's what I'm going to be doing. You can ground, you can like connect to the earth's charge through other parts of your body. So, my favorite practice in the winter is to touch the trees on my walks. I'm like the weirdo that stops and like puts my hands on the trees and just like takes some deep breaths and just like touch the trees. You are getting nature's charge. You are shifting your magnetic field and your inflammation levels when you do that. The tree is rooted and grounded into the earth. You are still getting that charge. So that's one way. You can also use water inside of your own home. So baths actually carry the charge of the earth because all of our piping in our homes, have to be grounded into the ground, right? This is like plumbing science that I know nothing about, but I know that they're grounded. Like copper pipes have to be like grounded, right? So water coming out of our faucets has moved from the earth into our bathtubs, into our showers. We are getting the charge of the earth through our water. So baths are an incredible practice for connecting us back to nature, even in the winter months. And I would say infrared light is the other way. So if you can get yourself some kind of infrared like mat or lamp or mask, like something that is getting concentrated infrared light into your space, that is really helpful. I've seen these great like happy lamps, like for winter for seasonal depression, where they are like infrared lamps that you just like put by your bed and have on while you sleep or have on. And I'm a huge fan of these because the extra infrared light is not messing with our melatonin. It's not pretending to be summer, but it is giving us the connection to nature's charge. It's giving us the cellular healing, anti-inflammatory, like dopamine support. It's really beautiful. So if you can get your hands on some infrared, do it. If you can't, use candles, use your fireplace, use fire in any way that you can to be like a central light source for your room. Okay, babes, I think that those are the main points that I wanted to hit. This was a lot. This was a dense one. I thought about putting this into 2 episodes, but we decided to just dive on it all together here. So you may want to re-listen to some of this, take down some notes, but here's our big picture, like synopsis for you. Winter holds medicine, and there is space to surrender to the rest, to the hibernation while still thriving without settling for exhaustion and depression and burnout. There's space for that. And we have to find the balance between what is a problem to solve and what is just resistance to rest that I just need to like work through up here and let my body do its thing. So, anything we can do to protect melatonin production through our light, to get therapeutic cold exposure for our brown adipose tissue, heat, and energy generation, to shift our nutrition, to be less focused on simple carbs, more focused on nourishing proteins and fats, to shift our eating times earlier in the day, to allow for more sleep, to get more balanced light into our eyeballs, to still connect with nature, even through the winter months. These are all threads that can be worked into every single day that are really going to transform how you feel throughout the entire winter, which will then trickle out into how you show up in the spring, in the summer, into next fall. And we begin a cycle. I love to think of cycle energy as like a wheel. And when a wheel is allowed to turn uninhibited, it picks up speed. It moves faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. So by allowing the wheel to turn to the other side, we're allowing it to pick up speed when we get back up to the top, right? Versus trying to do things the same way every day, which is a very like masculine energy way of doing things, is more like Elisa Vitti calls it a hockey puck. She's a hormone specialist and cycle syncing teacher, and she compares masculine energy to a hockey puck. You give it some forward motion and it goes with higher velocity until it slows down, and then it stops moving, right? So it hits a peak point and then slows down because the velocity is decreasing. That's masculine energy, and that is what happens when we try to just force through our winter months instead of honoring the cycle that we are in, the season that we are in. So this winter, my loves, can we all just be the wheel? Can we all just be the wheel? Can we surrender to what's here, find the medicine in the rest, support our biology in the way that it needs instead of pretending like we're still in summer mode, and really allow the rest and healing and restoration to happen on a deep level? It's what I want for all of us. And if you're joining me for the daily walking challenge, let me know. So if you found this conversation helpful or interesting or supportive, go ahead and share it with somebody else in your life. Make sure you are subscribed for future episodes where we continue diving into holistic health and thriving in motherhood. And while you're at it, give me some stars, give us a rating, leave a comment. All this engagement really helps me connect with you all, which I love to do, and gets this podcast into the ears of even more listeners. That is the main way that podcasts are able to grow. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing the medicine around. And until we meet again, I hope you just take beautiful care of yourself.